Hey folks, Jamie here. Thank you for tuning in. Before we get started, I would like for you to take a moment and go down below and hit the like and subscribe buttons. Maybe leave a comment. If you're really feeling generous, maybe share this video to your social media feeds. What that does is make it a lot easier for other people to find a Moment of Tiki. I really appreciate it and it helps out a lot. Thanks. Now, on with the show. Welcome to another episode of A Moment of Tiki, coming to you from the Lagoon of Mystery, my home tiki bar here in Central Texas, where today, right now, we are going to dive into part 3 of my episode, Music for a Dark Tiki Bar. So, this has already gone on way longer than I expected, so let's dive into it, okay? Now, those of you who watched last episode may have gotten a hint of what we're going to start with today when I referenced Carmen Miranda, and that is Bossa Nova, another great export from Brazil. It's one of my absolute favorite genres of music to play in the Lagoon. Hello, Cody. And it's Cody, our garage cat. Say hi, Cody. Bossa Nova seamlessly marries tropical with mid-century modern. It's swinging cool, it's hip, it's just groovy, man. It's there. It's a fusion of cool jazz and samba. Acoustic-driven guitar. It's a sound that appeals to jet setters and beatniks alike. Now, here are some of the top Bossa Nova artists that you should start looking for. It is by no means an exhaustive set. There are many more out there, but this will get you going, okay? First is João Gilberto, who is considered the father of Bossa Nova. He didn't single-handedly invent it, but he made it a musical force with his innovative guitar work. His early collaborator, Stan Getz, was a brilliant but troubled cool jazz saxophonist. He had amazing Bossa Nova collaborations with Charlie Byrd. Charlie Byrd's the one who introduced Stan Getz to Bossa Nova. Also João Gilberto. They produced the great album Getz Gilberto, which is the first jazz album to win the Grammy for Album of the Year. And it spawned the perpetual earworm Girl from Ipanema right there. But the entire album, start to finish, is just phenomenal. Unfortunately, Getz had an affair with Gilberto's wife, Astrid Gilberto, who you may know as the singer of the Girl from Ipanema, and that launched her with her own long-standing, very popular career during the 60s. So yeah, that kind of broke up a bunch of partnerships and pairings there. Not recommended. A little less dramatic is Antonio Carlos Jobim, who is also known as the father of Bossa Nova in Brazil. He composed many of the biggest hits in the Bossa Nova genre. Everyone covered his work, and he's just an extraordinary guitarist, but really his strength was very much in the compositions. Jorge Ben is another very talented Bossa Nova guitarist. He's probably best known as the composer of Mas Que Nada, which skyrocketed Sergio Mendes in Brazil 66 to fame in 1966. They married Bossa Nova with some hip modern sounds, and just a fantastic song altogether. Then there's Carlos Lyra. I'll wrap up with him. He's considered the greatest Bossa Nova composer next to Jobim. Has a bunch of albums out, a lot of compilations. Seek him out if you can. And I just want to point out that my non-theme music for Lagoon of Mystery, the one that plays in the middle of the series, the show. Yeah, that's Bossa Antigua, and that is Bossa Nova as well. That's how much I like it. Now, moving on from Bossa Nova, we're going into lounge and ultra lounge. This is another offshoot of jazz. Lounge encompasses Rat Pack and modern neo-lounge sounds that originated in the 90s when a lot of musical artists rediscovered these performers from the 50s and 60s. It's strongly associated with Las Vegas. It's not particularly tropical, but it is very evocative of 1950s and 1960s nostalgia, especially for the swinging cats, you know? Dig it, man? First and foremost among the lounge singers, and you probably wouldn't appreciate this. I mean, obviously he started from jazz, but Frank Sinatra, chairman of the board, one of the biggest musical artists of the 20th century, bar none. I'm not a huge fan of his later work. In fact, for many years I was wondering what the big deal was, but then I discovered his earlier work when he was still young and hungry, and it's like, aha, now I understand. So, no lounge Rat Pack collection is complete without a healthy representation of Sinatra. Next up, I want to suggest Julie London. She had an astonishingly successful career as a sultry singer. She had album after album after album after album. She's probably best known for Cry Me a River, but had many hits, lots of albums to choose from. Very charismatic, very breathy, very emotional singer, very evocative of the mood that she is trying to portray in her songs. Next, Dean Martin. You know, we can't stay away from Rat Pack very long. Dean Martin is my favorite in this section, you know, bar none. He was a great singer, didn't always seem to take things very seriously, had a sense of humor. His album Dino Latino, I think, is particularly fun. He wasn't an alcoholic, though. That was something many people don't realize, that all those glasses that he was drinking out of that people assumed was whiskey or some such. No, he didn't really drink when he was on the job. So a little bit of trivia for you there. Rounding out the Rat Pack, or at least the big three of the Rat Pack, is Sammy Davis Jr. And wow, I gotta say, he is maybe the all-around most talented individual on this entire list. I mean, all three parts of music for a Dark Tiki Bar. The man could sing, the man could dance, the man could act. He was just astonishingly versatile. The more I listen to Sammy, the more impressed I become. His live albums are particularly enjoyable. He's not quite as easy to come by as Sinatra, who has a million zillion compilations out there, or even Dean Martin. But if you seek him out, it's well worth the time. Now, shifting gears a little bit, I'm going to have to bring up Esquivel. Esquivel was a Mexican band leader and composer who specialized in, I mean, he was the epitome of space-age bachelor pad sound. He took standards and orchestrated and arranged them so they sounded like nothing on earth. Gonzo, wild, crazy stuff. Song Miniskirt, he did Andalusia. He took a lot of standards, added zuzus and wow-wows and choral work and everything. He heard things on a level that normal humans can't hear. And this is even before the orchestra performed them. He was just such a visionary, out of this world. But no collection is complete without a healthy dose of Esquivel. Now we're moving directly from Esquivel to Combustible Edison. Combustible Edison was one of the first neo-lounge, ultra-lounge groups in the 1990s, and they were inspired in great part by the rediscovery of Esquivel's work. When they formed in Rhode Island in 1990, they spearheaded the ultra-lounge revival and cocktail revolutions. Even some of their albums contained cocktail recipes. So this is the very, very early vanguard of the craft cocktail renaissance. Goes hand in hand with the ultra lounge movement. Now I want to add here at the end, Tiki-Yaki Orchestra. Tiki-Yaki Orchestra is not necessarily lounge or ultra lounge. They don't fit neatly into a particular category. Some people would say, well, they're exotica, and other people would say, well, they're kind of more surf, and others are like lounge. Tiki-Yaki is clearly influenced by Esquivel and also Herb Alpert and Tijuana Brass. They use elements of surf in their music. They also use elements of exotica, but they're not purely one style band. They just bring everything together and straddle multiple genres, and they're fantastic. If there is a single band that is the modern tiki bar aesthetic, it's probably got to be Tiki-Yaki Orchestra. They just got a new album out. They've got Swinging Sounds for the Jungle Jet Set is my absolute favorite of theirs, but they have Aloha Baby, just a string of albums, and all of them are keepers. So if you like kind of that retro hit swinging 1960s orchestrated sound, only kind of updated and modernized, then Tiki-Yaki Orchestra is for you. Next up, we are going to set the Wayback Machine to the early decades of the 20th century, to Trinidad in the Caribbean. Trinidad is the birthplace of calypso music. Calypso originated as protest music in Trinidad. The locals there had essentially no say in their government for decades. It was colonial rule by Britain, and then during World War II, the United States took it over to use as a base for military operations in the Gulf of Mexico and the Mid-Atlantic. And this created a lot of stress and tension there. The Trinidadians developed calypso as a form of protest. Many of the lyrics deal with the issues they were not allowed to openly debate or discuss, using a lot of veiled references and double entendres. A lot of it's very humorous, a lot of it is bawdy. Calypso is a distinct product of circumstances arising in the Caribbean, and I enjoy the heck out of it. It exploded in the popularity in late 1950s in the United States, and then almost rapidly faded away. And it's persisted for a long time, but it had a brief spike in popularity in the US, and that's where most Americans' knowledge of calypso originates from today. I do know for a fact that the legendary magician Ren Clark, he of Ren Clark's Polynesian Village, the magnum opus palace of tiki paradise found in Fort Worth in the 1960s, his home tiki bar, he was playing calypso in his home tiki bar as early as 1952. So that's a data point for you. Lord Invader. Have to start with Lord Invader. He is probably the first representative of calypso most Americans encounter, even if they don't know it. He had the first calypso hit in the U.S. inadvertently. The Andrews Sisters' 1944 cover of Rum and Coca-Cola was his. He recorded it first, he wrote it first, before Maury Amsterdam plagiarized it and claimed it as his own, resulting in the Andrews Sisters hits. Lord Invader had many, many other hits. After Rum and Coca-Cola hit it big, he even came up with a song called Pepsi Cola, kind of as a little protest. The Mighty Sparrow had a long-running career. He had a huge hit in 1956 with Gene and Dinah, which is a song I particularly like. It was a commentary on prostitution in Trinidad after the United States closed its military naval bases there and moved out. The Mighty Sparrow also wrote a little ditty you may have heard of called the Banana Boat Song. Very talented individual. Calypso Rose. Calypso Rose is one of the few female singers of calypso. She actually got into it because of the misogyny she recognized and disapproved of in many of the male-dominated Calypsonians' songs. She crashed the all-male party and became the first woman known as the Calypso King in 1978, after which they renamed it as the Calypso Monarch, basically in her honor. Like Hapa Howley, when it was very popular, all musical performers jumped on the bandwagon and recorded Hapa Howley albums. Well, something similar happened to a lesser extent with Calypso when it blew up really big in the late 50s. One of the performers who made a Calypso album was Robert Mitchum. Yes, the Robert Mitchum, the actor, the tough guy. And he's actually quite an accomplished singer. His album, Calypso Is Like So, is quite enjoyable. I like it. It's a little disconcerting for him to sing the entire thing in a faux Caribbean accent. But if you can get past that, it's a fun jaunt, and, you know, it was the first album he ever recorded, so more power to him. If he was moved by the power of Calypso to do that and put himself out there, then by all means, go for it, man. Another famous name you might know of who recorded a Calypso album was Maya Angelou, the poet, the famed poet who was National Poet Laureate. Early in her career, she recorded Miss Calypso, which was an album of Calypso standards. Run Joe, Trouble in the Family. There's a lot of classic Calypso melodies in here, and she puts her own spin on it and does quite an outstanding job too. Finally, I can't not talk about Calypso without bringing up Harry Belafonte. He's still with us. He's been retired from performing for a very long time. Belafonte is the one single individual who is most responsible for Calypso ever being a blip on the American consciousness with his rendition, his indelible rendition of the Banana Boat song. I mean, from Beetlejuice to every other reference, even Stan Freberg's hilarious satire of the Banana Boat song. Harry Belafonte brought Calypso to the American consciousness. Curiously, though, Belafonte was not from Trinidad. He was had joint Jamaican, New York American citizenship, and he spent time in both places, had a foot in both worlds. He didn't consider himself a Calypsonian. He considered himself a folk singer, and his earliest albums are folk songs, very much in that tradition, and I'm not sure what resulted in him recording his first album of Calypso, but he ended up recording half a dozen albums after that, and each one is impressive. I mean, the man has a spectacular voice. The production values are top-notch, which many of the Calypsonians recording in the Caribbean did not have access to, even most modern technology. So all the cards were stacked in Belafonte's favor, and he played his hand very well. Absolute monster hit with Banana Boat in 1956, and it was all uphill from there for the, what people call the King of Calypso. Now, there are some other genres that may or may not fit within your musical tiki aesthetic, but I want to bring them up and just to address them so people don't go into the comments and say, well, what about this? What about that? First off is steel drums, or steel pan as they're often called in the Caribbean. This is another product of Trinidad, and I really like steel drums. I just love the sound of it, but there's a couple of problems incorporating steel drum music into your tiki bar. One thing is that for me, steel drums are evocative of bright, sunny beaches, daytime party frolicking, that it's a very bright sound, it's very energetic. So Dark Tiki Bar might not fit perfectly with that, but the bigger concern is that most of the readily available steel drum music is crap. There are a couple of old albums that have fallen into public domain, so unscrupulous publishers take those recordings, repackage them, rename them, and put them out as if it's a different album. So I've got like 2 or 3 various named albums that have the exact same tracks on them, low quality, low fidelity. Even more so is the fact that many of the available steel drum albums are essentially taken from Carnival cruise lines. I'm sorry, but nobody wants to go into a tiki bar and hear the Eagles' Desperado or Jimmy Buffett's Margaritaville or Buster Poindexter's Hot, Hot, Hot played on steel drum. I mean, to me, that's the definition of hell. There are some modern recordings of steel drums by original artists, but many of these, for some reason, think that steel drum music and smooth jazz is a good fusion to make. And I'm sorry, if I'm listening to steel drum music, I don't want you to stop in the middle of the song for an extended electric guitar solo or a saxophone solo or something like that. Your best bet is just go into bargain bins at thrift stores and find old steel drum Caribbean albums that were put out in the 1950s and 60s. You find those, rip those, go with that. Okay, next, reggae. Now, this is going to generate some controversy. If you go to a tiki purist and ask them about reggae, they will tell you that reggae has no place in a tiki bar's playlist. Reggae is not traditionally tiki music. Reggae is from the Caribbean, not Polynesia. This is all true. But I must point out that surf music had not been traditionally considered tiki music until more recent decades, and now it is ubiquitous amongst tiki culture. Also, my feelings on the Caribbean are well-founded. If you are insisting on removing every trace of the Caribbean from your tiki experience, then by all means, send your rum to me. I will give it a loving home. Reggae, tiki wouldn't exist without its Caribbean influence, and reggae is not my go-to for a tiki soundtrack. I don't mind it. I like reggae in certain circumstances, but to each his own. I don't think it is inappropriate. If you do go the reggae route, I would just implore you not to be lazy and slap on a copy of Bob Marley's greatest hits. I mean, put some thought into it. Track down a more diverse array of performers. I mean, the easy ones would be Burning Spear, Bunny Yeager, not Bunny Yeager, Bunny Wailer. Bunny Yeager was a pinup photographer. Something like Steel Pulse from the 80s. My personal favorite, going local here, is the Killer Bees, an Austin-based group that played all over the world, has some really killer stuff, and actually convinced me that I liked reggae when I was in that kind of snotty late teen, so reggae sucks phase, and I saw them play live, and I was won over. So unfortunately, the Killer Bees, most of their stuff is out of print now, but if you can track it down, they've got some really fun stuff. A lot of interesting and clever covers. Now, I can't mention reggae without mentioning island reggae, or the so-called Hawaiian sound. This is one of the most popular genres of music in the Hawaiian Islands, and it's also spread to some of the other Polynesian islands in the Pacific as well. It is essentially taking the form of Jamaican reggae and adapting it to the culture and themes and importance and rhythms of Hawaii. And there are many, many performers who have put out scads of albums and singles. They have devoted followings on the West Coast, and they're insanely popular in the Hawaiian Islands themselves. I have not investigated these very much, so I don't have a lot of names to share with you. But all you have to do is go to the Google and enter, island reggae or Jawaiian, and you will come up with many people who are more than happy to share their music with you. So if you want a reggae sound that's not the traditional Caribbean reggae sound, but giving a little bit closer to Polynesia, then that's your on-ramp. And believe it or not, that's it. We've done it. No, we haven't. I'm sorry. One more. Time out. One more. Traditional Indigenous songs and recordings. These would be things such as Tahitian drummers, drums of Bora Bora, Maori chants and songs from New Zealand. These types of recordings of Indigenous peoples performing their Indigenous music, which predates a lot of the European influences, I think adds a lot to a good Tiki Bar playlist, particularly the drumming. Drumming's really cool. The vocals and the songs add a lot as well. But there are quite a few compilations online with this. I know there are several sets from Tahiti, Bora Bora, the Cook Islands, Rarotonga. All of these combine to add additional verisimilitude, authentic experience to your tiki fantasy. And as I've said before, I think it is incumbent on us Tiki Files. It behooves us, so to speak, to support the cultures from which we are liberally borrowing, even though what we have put together here is not an authentic representation of any culture anywhere that ever existed. There are still elements from them, and for that we owe these peoples a debt of gratitude. Wow. And we're done. That is 3 episodes, more than 90 minutes of Tiki Bar music playlist goodness. Now, I don't want you to think that this is a comprehensive or exclusive list. There's musical genres that I haven't gotten to. There's old school punk rock, which is really popular in some quarters for Tiki Bar playlists. Asian music, like Japanese vintage koto music, or Balinese gamelan, or all these other types of indigenous music from other cultures that have an exotic, strange, and otherworldly sound to it. There's lots of genres from the Caribbean and South America that I have not gotten to. This is not a comprehensive list, but this is a list that will hopefully give you a jumping off point. And just because I'm extra nice, I have created an eclectic playlist here on the YouTubes that you can click on right up there and listen to, and give you even more examples and different artists that I wasn't able to get to here. Hopefully you'll find it interesting. You're not going to like all of it, but hopefully there will be some that will pique your interest, so you will be able to go down that rabbit hole and track down those artists and those songs that really speak to you, and curate your own personal bespoke Tiki Bar playlist. So no one will ever have to complain again that they don't expect you to listen to Martin Denny or play Martin Denny continuously in a loop, because there is so much more out there that makes for fantastic, immersive, transportive Tiki Bar listening. So, until next time, from the Lagoon of Mystery, aloha. Oh, you're still here? Good. Because I have to get up on my soapbox one more time to discuss music that explicitly is not tiki, and that is Jimmy Buffett. Now, before any parrot heads out there in the audience get riled up, I am actually a fan of Jimmy Buffett. I have many of his albums and think that he is a masterful songwriter, a brilliant performer, but even more so, an astute and astonishing businessman. But that does not mean that his music is tiki in any way, shape, or form. Jimmy Buffett's music is Gulf and Western, to coin the term. He developed the Key West sound. He is based in Florida. That is where he rose to fame. And it is crucial to realize that Jimmy Buffett developed and evolved and came to fame in the 1970s as tiki was dying. Now, both Jimmy Buffett and tiki music are escapist. Jimmy Buffett is absolutely escapist, but in very different ways. With the decline of tiki, there were no places where you could go to escape from the average, mundane, everyday life and pretend you were someplace else, to imagine that you were in paradise. With Jimmy Buffett, the escapism was in the here and now. There was no transportive element there. His was the beaches of modern day. More recently, 5 o'clock somewhere is somewhere in the modern day. There is no escape to a mythical paradise in his work. So that is a significant dividing line. People who conflate Jimmy Buffett with tiki are the same people who conflated the traditional chicky huts in Florida, the thatched palapa-ish constructs that originated with the Seminole Indian tribes, with tiki huts, even though Seminole tribes had nothing to do with tiki. Those are the same people who say, ah, yes, Jimmy Buffett, there are tiki bars in Margaritaville. No, there are not. It is not. It is an affront to tiki-dom. And you know what? Jimmy Buffett would probably admit the same to you if you brought it up to him. But that's neither here nor there. Suffice to say, Jimmy Buffett is a talented songwriter, but has no place in a tiki bar playlist. Oh, and to all you parrot heads out there, Margaritaville is not a party anthem. For God's sakes, listen to the lyrics. It's a drunken guy drinking himself into oblivion because he totally screwed up the perfect relationship and is in denial. That's not a party anthem. That is depressing as hell.